friends, I'm Emma Goswell, and I'm your host for Coming Out Stories. So we're a podcast from What Goes On Media, and funnily enough, we share coming out stories. We'll try and bring you one every single month, all in an attempt to spread the love and share some positive representations of queer people. If you do love our podcast, please subscribe and spread the word. Now, quite a lot has happened in my life since I last sat down to talk to you. I now have a ring on my finger. Yup. And I've made an honest woman of my gorgeous girlfriend, Siobhan. Yes, I am now married and can call her my wife. Wow. It was about a month ago now, but I'm still not used to saying it. Maybe that's because I never thought it would happen. Because, of course, I grew up in the 1970s and 80s, so for most of my life, it wasn't a possibility. And it really wasn't something I ever dreamt of happening. We've come a long way, haven't we, as a community? And that is something to celebrate. And boy, did we celebrate. I think I'm still recovering. Even producer Sam flew into Manchester, England, all the way from Phoenix, Arizona, to witness the big day. I can honestly say it was the best day of my life. I can highly recommend it. Right, enough about me. But before we crack on with this episode, I do want to talk briefly about I'm a Celebrity. Now, if you're in the UK, you're probably aware of the reality TV show where celebs are forced to stay in the Australian jungle and complete trials that usually involve spiders, rats, snakes and other creepy crawlies and eating kangaroo penis. It's a lot of fun. And I can't believe that this year I get to watch my good friend Dean McCulloch in the jungle camp. Now, he's had a tough time in the last week, but I'm really rooting for him and hope he can win. Now, if you've been watching it and you're a fan, the good news is you can hear his coming out story. Where? Well, here, of course, on this very podcast. He was one of our very first interviews, as you're going to have to scroll back all the way to September 2018 to have a listen and find out his coming out story all about growing up gay in Belfast. He's a trooper. We love him. Come on, Dean. Right, shall we meet this episode's guest? Kuchenga Shenje is a trans woman who did tell me that if the terminology existed in the 90s, she probably would have come out as non-binary trans femme. More importantly, though, she's a writer, a journalist and a speaker who's worked for the likes of The Stylist, British Vogue and Netflix. Her debut novel, The Library Thief, has just been welcomed with rave reviews. Now, she started by telling me how young she was when she was aware of her gender identity.
Yeah, that knowingness. I was very early on, 3, 4-ish. In fact, that picture of me above my writing desk is me
in the little frame?
That's right. Oh. Yeah, that's me in the sandpit. And in nursery, I was fiercely defensive of my nightie. It was a purple satin nightie with a black lace overlay, frilly neckline. And I don't even remember fighting about it, to be honest. Like, everyone knew that's Kuchenga's dress. And to be honest, so yeah, my gender nonconformity was very visible, but also in terms of myself. Yeah, I knew that I was a girl incredibly early on, and I didn't learn how dangerous it was until 7-ish, at which point I guess I clammed up. But it was the early 90s. So because of the different talk shows, I saw trans people everywhere. You know, whether that was Sally Jessel Raphael, Ricky Lake, Jerry Springer, Kilroy.
It was a golden age of talk shows, wasn't it?
It was. Exactly. So I knew that it was possible for boys to become girls, girls to become boys, whatever. But I just thought it was something like winning the lottery, you know, that you weren't allowed to do that unless you were really special. And everyone else was calling me gay at that point. And so because...
When you say was it other kids, you mean? Or?
It was other kids mainly, but adults as well. Yeah, for sure.
I guess for most people, there's an effeminate boy, they are gay.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I knew that's how I was viewed. And then the bullying intensified in secondary school, where it was just so dangerous for me. But I don't know where the defiance came from. You know, I was mincing through school in my urban comprehensive in North London, going across the playground with a copy of French Vogue clutched at my breast, and I would hold it like Cher in Clueless. Like I liked carrying my books clutched to my bosom in that way. Yeah, I was asking for it, but at the same time, it was just really important to me on a spiritual level that there was always going to be essential parts of my femininity that couldn't be crushed.
And this was all North London in the sort of early 90s when you were growing up?
I entered secondary school the September after the death of Diana. Yeah, I left that secondary school in 2002, and that was a Will and Gracie time and stuff, so everyone wanted a gay best friend, and I say everyone. I moved from a very strict gender-normed secondary school to a very liberal middle to upper middle class school in Camden, where I blossomed. I really came into my own, and because I was a token, I really did relish that role. I didn't know what it meant to be tokenized or stereotyped. I wasn't thinking that deeply. I just knew that it was finally safe for me to be more brash with my unbridled femininity, and I just took that and ran with it.
Well, because you said it was unsafe and you had bullying. Did the bullying turn physical at the previous school?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Sorry, I always assume that goes without saying. Yeah, absolutely. No, bullying in secondary school was physical, verbal, mental, emotional, and often with a sexual tinge. You know, I think because of my gender nonconformity and the body that I had, I was seen as needing to be punished for my femininity, but also that there was something not just taboo, but also something that marked me out for sexual denigration in some way. Yeah, the boys were horrific. It was boys and girls though. I have to say that it was, yeah, definitely a communal activity, but really warped because I was popular. You know, it's not like I was unpopular, and I did feel valued in certain ways because I was always seen as exceptional, and my gender nonconformity meant that I actually couldn't be on road in the way that it was expected of black boys at that time. It just wasn't a path for me. So I think I had my bourgeois aspirations, but also my softness marked me out as destined for something different, and I was a real annoying nerd. Like, I was in all the higher classes, I read a lot, I showed off about reading a lot, and I really did want people to know that I was not going to be in the same places that they were, that I was not normal, and I was okay with that.
That must have taken a lot of strength.
It did. I became homeless at 17 when my home was no longer safe for me to stay there. I went to my friends at Camden. I was housed by a lot of really generous families at that time, and eventually I went to a homeless hostel for young people in South Kensington, of all places. So I had a room there. And that was at that hostel where I met my first trans women, actually. Yeah, and then I had a bedsit, but I was studying for my A-levels whilst I was homeless. And so I got the required amount of grades to go to a small university in Paris where I didn't actually do too well. I wasn't comfortable there, so I left there and came back to Sussex.
You must be fluent in French then to have even tried that.
You know, I think I've lost so much of my French over the years, but whenever I go there, I am the friend that everyone depends on. And yeah, so I can still order a decent meal and be flirted with in French. Yeah, I've had my lovers. Yeah.
Good to hear. I feel like we skipped over a bit though. So you were getting bullied at school, and what
Right.
was the reaction from parents? Did you have both parents at home? Were they both
Yeah.
questioning the way you presented?
Yes, absolutely. I think they avoided the topic, obviously conversationally, but just even in themselves, like it was really obvious to everyone around. I know everyone was looking on with bated breath for the explosion, which eventually came. They just were not resourced as parents to handle having a gender non-conforming child. It was just not in their wheelhouse, not expected. They just didn't know what to do.
Did you have siblings?
I have a younger sister. She's my best friend and the love of my life. Yeah. Yeah.
So she supported you?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And again, in terms of that knowingness, like she knew as well, like, you know, and stuff. And yeah, I think we did have a period where we weren't talking and stuff, and it was just so painful for both of us. There was the estrangement that occurred. Obviously, I was the primary victim of it, but it hurt everyone, you know. So for me to be ejected from my family and my community and stuff, it still hurts. And I always feel like I've got over it. And then there'll be one day where I see something, or I just start missing some aspect of that life before. And I have to do a lot of work to look after myself on those days, yeah.
So are you still estranged from your family then?
My mother passed away in 2020 from Alzheimer's. It was a 10-year battle, very much so a long goodbye and things. And I did find healing with her before the Alzheimer's diagnosis, actually, which I was always also grateful for. And losing my mother obviously impacts my writing and things, and I won't stop writing about it. I've written about her in, good couple of essays and a Vogue article as well. Yeah, I definitely found peace with her, but for my dad, that was not possible. I am the firstborn, and I think all of the expectations, he was, Mufasa looking for a Simba. And, I was very happy to be, Nala on the runway, kind of like, New York, Paris, London, Tokyo. Do you know what I mean? He just wasn't, he would never be able to accept having someone like me as a child.
And was it the admittance that you were trans, or was it just the fact, did he just think that you were gay and that was enough to sort of get you out of home?
Oh, yeah, that was more than enough. And I think turning 39 next month, I was born in 85, and, being a young person in the 90s, I still identify as a transsexual because of the time that I was born into and who I looked up to. The Tracy Africas, the Caroline Cossies, the April Ashleys. I always knew that obviously there's a transgender umbrella, but I was always aware at what part of the umbrella sheltered me from the rain. Like, I really do feel so comfortable in the way that I manifest divine femininity, my adoration of glamour and self-care and communion with other women and stuff. I was very much influenced by the ballroom community of New York and, the chosen family and the creation of alternative family structures. Obviously, I'm from a different culture, but I still feel a sense of responsibility to my sisters generally, but the wider LGBTQ community as well, of course. Yeah. Was
there a time you can remember articulating the fact that you weren't actually a gay boy, as everyone seemed to think around you, and in fact you were a woman? Can you remember saying that to someone for the first time?
I think I was so tentative in coming out because I saw what other trans people go through. And so because of that, I think I held off on declarations until I could live comfortably as a woman, frankly. So there were whispers and personal conversations and therapy and all of that stuff. But until I was ready, and also to be honest, it's I think it's weird for me because I was always not necessarily an interloper, but I do always remember other gay people saying, "So what's going on with you?" You know, and we didn't have the as much vocabulary and discourse around non-binary identity, but I think the way that I was presenting myself for a long while before coming out as a transsexual was definitely non-binary trans femme. And I feel like I would have used those words more if I'd had them at the time. So it was an evolution. There were stages. But yeah, in terms of the sit-down chats, I didn't do a lot of that if it wasn't necessary. Yeah, I just turned up. And
I'm wearing this frock today. And this is
yeah,
happening.
yeah, for sure. And I think as well, obviously there were those moments turning up to a birthday party, whatever, sure. But even just skinny jeans, a handbag, and ballet flats was enough. People got it.
Yeah.
And to be honest, like obviously I did lose friends and things, but if they didn't get it, they're no longer in my life. I was very strict about that. I don't get misgendered. If somebody was finding it difficult to honour the femininity that they saw in me, then they were completely excised from my life without explanation.
And how did university go, or the beginnings of work life? Did people respect your pronouns? Did people respect your gender?
Again, I think I placed myself in certain environments, to be honest. So I was very much supported in my work environments. And also there's the period of unemployment that I had was really long. I think that lasted for around 6-7 years. And I did what a lot of other trans women have had to do during that time in order to survive, with no apology. Loved it, actually. But anyway, point is, I've placed myself in environments and in cities where I could not only find safety, but where I could thrive into becoming the person and the writer that I always wanted to be.
Well, you've gone from London to Berlin to Manchester, so you kind of have, haven't you?
Yeah, by way of Brighton as well, actually.
Oh,
yeah,
right,
that was an
yes,
important stay.
another gay mecca.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was an interesting time for me because I was living stealth before I went to Brighton. And so I had an interesting experience. I lived above the Marlborough. And even though I was doing bits and bobs, I also had a number of people who didn't know that I was trans whilst I was living there. And I always say that I feel like because I'm a fat black girl as well, like I think like people just look at me as kind of like a Martha Wash, you know, sort of like I'm kind of, the one who sings on the house tracks and stuff and just has loads of gay friends just because she's fabulous and stuff, which is true. So that's been my role, regardless of whether I've been particularly vocal about my transsexuality or not.
I feel like quite a lot of trans people I speak to do this sort of moving from place to place as well. And I think I've spoken to a lot of people who've moved away to transition and then come back and done that.
I mean, historically, that's actually what was advised through the medical establishment. I love the documentary Screaming Queens. It's also available on YouTube and Prime Video. And that's a documentary made by Susan Stryker about the history of trans people in San Francisco. It's very much about the Compton cafeteria riots and stuff, but also what the girls needed to do then to transition. And then there's another film that's made in the 70s. Is it I Am What I Am, or I Want What I Want, or something like that? And the doctors there said, that it's about acceptance, and pockets of women or workplaces or whatever will not accept you, and therefore anonymity, a geographical move, is necessary. And like I said, because of the time that I grew up in, I was aware that should be my path. I definitely did that myself, particularly when I wanted to go stealth and stuff. I definitely wanted to go to Middle England and just be that random black girl from round the way.
Oh, that was the Brighton years.
No, that was actually Swindon. I didn't mention that. That's those are the years we don't mention. But
Okay.
but yeah, moving to Swindon was, I mean, it was wildly boring, but it was also good for me in that I got the space to just be away from it all and without the weight of everything that's discussed in media and stuff. I just got to just be, you know, a girl who lives in a flat and had a boyfriend and a lovely little dog and everything, and it was really fun.
And I guess after essentially getting thrown out of home and all the bullying,
Yeah.
you're craving just being normal and just being stealth and just
Tranquility,
cracking on with your life, yeah?
Yeah, for me, I definitely wanted that. And I think even though I have such strong links and my social life is very much based around the LGBTQ community, but I have this separate life, which is like I'm not violently stealth all the time, but, you know, like I don't talk about it day to day. Like it's just not, apart from my sexual partners, it's just not something that I talk about regularly. And I think also because I'm a writer as well, there was a time like in the whole kind of 2010s online essay era, you know, I definitely gave far too much of myself at that time in a lot of the things that I was writing, whereas now I'm a lot more considered and boundaried and, dare I say, sophisticated and like, you know, what I choose to share and the stories that I choose to tell and how much of myself I choose to give, to be honest. But I think I've got a splicing where I'm very much connected to my community. I'm able to give to my community in the way that I need to, but I'm also still able to just be the black girl from round the way that I always wanted to be.
Yeah. Well, I mean, your first book is out, The Library Thief, and there's a beautiful picture of you on the back cover. There's
Thank
a bit
you.
of blurb about you.
Yeah.
I've been on your website,
Sure.
and there isn't really mention of the fact that you're trans, and that's obviously very conscious,
Yeah.
isn't it?
I mean, it's between me and my agent, really. And, you know, my publisher's just always been super respectful. But I think I've always wanted to not write what people expect of me, you know, and I knew that I could forge a career as a black trans writer and have that be at the forefront, and it would be politically significant, and I could have done that. But I also felt that the space that I've created for myself, where people receive me as a writer first and foremost, who writes about a whole range of issues, it felt more liberating to do that. And also, I know that I don't need to put any effort myself into being pigeonholed. So, yeah, I really wanted to just have the freedom that all writers should have to create worlds and create characters without feeling that we have to be responsible for whatever headline is in the papers or in the news or online that day.
Yeah, I mean, we should point out that your book is a sort of Gothic mystery set in the 18th century, right?
Precisely,
it's very different to what, you know, a lot of other trans writers are doing.
Yeah, and, you know, and I read everyone. Like, I love them. Like, do you know what I mean? So, yeah, I am so thankful for Travis Alabanza, Sean Fay, Tori Peters. I'm obsessed with everyone's work, but I also felt that what I want to do, I haven't seen done yet. And I don't feel like I'm intelligent enough to be, you know, like a Michelle Obama level kind of pioneer or something. Like, I'm not comfortable declaratively being the first, but I also don't know of another black trans woman writing fiction with a major book deal today. And I think that's really upsetting. But I also feel the fact that I felt emotionally, spiritually called to do that, yeah, it just fills me with a huge sense of purpose. And also, even though like right now it's really cool for me to be able to present myself how I am doing so, there's such a history of trans women doing so much in the cultural, artistic, political space, whatever, and then years later being given accolades for things that they weren't necessarily so loud about at that time, but later on we can then collect our flowers in whatever way we so choose. So yeah,
I feel like you're really living the dream now, aren't you? When you think what you've been through, all those tough times of being homeless and really struggling with life, and all that it threw at you. What would you say to a young Kuchenga to help them to cope with everything that they'd gone through? I mean, normally I sort of ask the question, what advice would you have for people coming out? But you didn't essentially come out, did you really? It was, like you say, a long process.
It was a long process. And it's like other people say, you come out every day. I mean, depending on how visibly trans queer you are or whatever. But if I were to speak to my younger self, I would suggest wearing sun cream from an earlier age, and I would also say expect more love than you do. My self-esteem was so crushed by the trauma that I experienced that I just felt so marked and unlovable. And I think I have been loved a lot, and I've got wonderfully loving friends and romantic partners and everything. But if I do have regrets, it's those people who were willing to love me, but I just wasn't yet able to see the difference between love and attention. So yeah, just be more open to love is what I would tell the little girl that was me.
And what's next? You've just had your first novel out.
Yes.
What's happening now?
I am 56,000 words into my second novel, which I've been writing for years. So I've written a lot more than that, but I've just edited down, and I'm in Act 2 of what will be a 3-act novel. That picture up there is Emma Hamilton. I'm the mistress of Admiral Nelson, and my main character is a black Jamaican trans girl from North London who believes that she is a direct descendant of Admiral Horatio Nelson, and it tells a tale of her surviving sex, drugs, scandal, and a kind of Christine Keeler kind of fashion and things, and it's a coming of age tale, a Bildungsroman, and telling the tale of a young black and trans girl from North London really finally getting the life that she wants.
So another historical novel, but this one sounds a lot more sort of autobiographical in a way.
To be honest, again, I think it's contemporary with pulling from history, as all stories tend to do. And also, of course, there's autobiographical elements. There's autobiographical elements in everything I write, to be honest. But even though it sounds like there's a lot of alignment with my life, but for me, from a literary perspective, it's been so interesting to take the basic details of our identities and line it up. Everyone can expect that this is going to be more about me than it actually is. My imagination is at full pelt. So I'm hoping that people expect it to be more autobiographical than it actually is.
Interesting. Well, I feel like I'm disturbing you from carrying on writing, so you better get back to your desk.
Snap open the laptop and get on with it. No, you're right. Thank you so much.
The wonderful Kuchenga Shenje. A massive thank you to her for talking to me. And not just that, for inviting me into her home as well. So I actually got to see where she writes. Wonderful. And I have now finished her novel, The Library Thief, as has my wife, which I absolutely loved. It's a gothic mystery, and it is genuinely a real page-turner. Oh, and there are some great lesbian and gay characters as well. And I reckon if you're a fan of Sarah Waters, which I definitely am, you will love it. Go get it. Next episode, we're off to the US to meet Wendy Cole, who came out to her parents as trans at the age of 10. That was way back in the 1950s. She would wait a whopping 57 years to transition. And she told me how difficult things were for people like her back in the 60s in America.
It was against the law for someone assigned male at birth to appear publicly as female. New York City, drag queens, transsexuals, transvestites, that's what we were known as back in those days, they were arrested regularly and put in jail and fined. That's why in June of 1969, when they had the Stonewall riots, the first people to throw bricks at the cops were the transsexuals and the drag queens.